First Contact and the Fatal Mistake. The war room of Bloodstone Station hung in the void between three dying stars. Its walls were forged from the bones of extinct giants, polished smooth by centuries of use. Around the hexagonal table sat the five most feared beings in the known galaxy, each representing a species that had clawed their way up from worlds that should have killed them. General Vorthak shifted his massive frame, his rocky hide scraping against the reinforced chair. The Stoneheart leader had survived the crushing gravity and molten storms of Infernus Prime, where the very air was liquid fire. His people had learned to breathe poison and call it sweet. Nothing in the universe had managed to break them, and Vorthak intended to keep it that way. Across from him, Huntress Zalara's 6 arms moved in complex patterns as she spoke. Her chitinous exoskeleton bore scars from 1,000 battles on Razorwind, where metallic hurricanes could slice through starship hulls. The Bladeborn had evolved from insects that fed on pain itself. "Show us this impossible world again," she clicked, her mandibles creating harmonics that made the air itself seem to vibrate with menace. A holographic display activated, revealing a blue and green sphere that rotated peacefully in the projection center. It looked almost pleasant, deceptively calm. Commander Thys, whose pale form seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it, leaned forward with interest. His species, the Voidborn, had evolved in the depths of black holes, feeding on radiation that would instantly kill most life forms. "Our sensors confirm it," he whispered, his voice like dying echoes. "This is a Class X Deathworld. The readings are off our scales." Fleet Admiral Gorex slammed one of his 4 fists on the table, causing the entire station to shudder. The Warhammer clan had survived on Skullcrusher, where gravity was so intense that mountains were forced into perfect spheres. Every breath was a battle against physics itself. Impossible. Nothing intelligent can evolve on a Class X world. We barely survived Class VI planets, and were the toughest species in the galaxy. The 5th member of their council, Master Venka of the Shadowclaw, remained silent. Her people had evolved on a world where darkness itself was alive and hungry. They had learned to hunt the very concept of fear. When she finally spoke, her words carried the weight of absolute certainty. Yet they exist. The question is, what are they? Dr. Nexus, their chief xenobiologist, activated additional displays. The peaceful blue world transformed, revealing its true nature. Massive storms larger than gas giants swirled across its surface. Lightning strikes that could power entire star systems crackled through clouds dense enough to crush battleships. The oceans moved with such violence that they regularly swallowed entire landmasses. The planet is 70% covered in liquid dihydrogen monoxide, Dr. Nexus explained, his mechanical voice devoid of emotion. This substance is so corrosive that it dissolves almost everything it touches. The temperature variations range from levels that freeze atmospheric gases solid to heat that vaporizes metal. The weather patterns are completely chaotic and unpredictable. General Vorthak studied the readings with growing disbelief. His people lived on worlds where lava rivers were considered pleasant streams, but even they couldn't survive prolonged exposure to liquid water. What about the life forms? The display shifted to show creatures that defied imagination. Massive predators with rows of serrated teeth that could shear through armor plating. Flying beasts with talons designed to puncture starship hulls. Microscopic organisms that could dissolve living tissue in seconds. Plants that actively hunted and consumed anything that moved. Everything on this world exists in a constant state of warfare, Dr. Nexus continued. The plants are toxic. The animals hunt in coordinated packs with intelligence levels approaching sentience. Even the insects deliver venom that can kill creatures 1,000 times their size. It's not just a death world. It's a training ground for ultimate predators. Huntress Zalara's 6 eyes focused intently on the display and the dominant species. These humans. They don't just survive on this world, Dr. Nexus replied. They have conquered it entirely. They've built massive cities, developed technologies that harnessed the planet's violent forces and spread to every corner of their death trap. Most remarkably, they've domesticated many of the predatory species and used them as food sources. The silence that followed was broken only by the distant hum of the station's life support systems. These were beings who had survived horrors that would drive most species extinct, but the idea of voluntarily living on such a world was beyond their comprehension. Human Lieutenant Commander Jake Rivera's team hadn't just held their position. They had somehow turned the tables and eliminated the entire opposing force while taking 0 casualties. The environmental conditions that were supposed to impair their performance had somehow made them more effective. Explain these readings, Orcs demanded of his tactical analyst. Sir, the human team's accuracy and coordination actually improved as the stress factors increased, the analyst reported. When we introduced sleep deprivation, extreme temperatures, and simulated wounds, their performance metrics went up by 37%. Orcs studied the data with growing unease. Every species in the Dominion showed predictable performance degradation under stress. It was a fundamental law of biology. But these humans seemed to operate by different rules entirely. What about psychological factors? That's the most disturbing part, sir. When we introduced elements designed to trigger fear responses, simulated predators, overwhelming odds, imminent death, the humans became calmer and more focused. Their stress hormones actually enhanced their capabilities rather than impairing them. That evening, the Dominion leadership convened an emergency session in General Vorthak's private chambers. The room was smaller than the main council chamber, but filled with trophies from 1,000 conquered worlds. Weapons that had killed gods hung on the walls alongside the preserved remains of extinct civilizations. The integration is proceeding too smoothly, Vorthak said, pacing before a window that showed the swirling death spiral of nearby stars. I expected problems. Cultural conflicts, adjustment difficulties, integration trauma. The humans are adapting faster than any species we've encountered, Huntress Zulara reported. They're not just surviving our environments, they're thriving in conditions that kill our own people. Commander Thiss's shadowy form rippled with agitation. There's something else. Our intelligence networks have been trying to gather information about human military capabilities. Every time we probe deeper, we discover they're far more dangerous than they appear. Master Venka's eyes glowed like dying embers. Explain. They call their homeworld Earth, Thiss continued. But that's not what concerns me. What concerns me is that they've conquered other worlds in their system. They've built colonies on worlds that we would classify as uninhabitable death traps, and they treat them as vacation destinations. Dr. Nexus activated a holographic display showing Earth's solar system. Observe their expansion patterns. They've established permanent settlements on a world with no atmosphere and temperatures that fluctuate between molten and absolute zero. They've sent exploratory missions to a planet where the atmosphere is pure poison, and the pressure would crush our heaviest armor. They're planning expeditions to worlds that exist in the radiation shadow of their system's star. The silence that followed was deafening. Fleet Admiral Gorex's 4 hands clenched into fists. Are you telling us that their homeworld, this Class X Deathworld that we considered impossible to survive, is the safest place in their system? That appears to be correct, Dr. Nexus confirmed. General Vorthak stopped pacing. For the first time in his centuries of life, he felt something he'd almost forgotten. Fear. Not the familiar fear of battle or the respect for dangerous opponents, but a deep primal terror that came from realizing you were no longer the apex predator. Show me their military history, he commanded. The holographic display changed, revealing data that made the assembled leadership question everything they thought they knew about warfare. Human conflicts weren't just battles for resources or territory. They were systematic experiments in destruction on a scale that dwarfed Dominion warfare. They had developed weapons that could sterilize planets, tactics that could destroy solar systems, and strategies that treated the extinction of species as acceptable collateral damage. This is their idea of conventional warfare, Dr. Nexus explained. What they call limited conflicts involve casualty rates that exceed our worst military disasters. What they call total war involves the complete restructuring of planetary ecosystems. Huntress Zalara's mandibles clicked in what her species recognized as mortal terror. How many of these conflicts have they fought? Continuously, for their entire recorded history, came the reply. They have never experienced peace. Even when they're not fighting external enemies, they fight each other. Even when they're not fighting each other, they fight their own planet. Combat isn't just part of their culture. It's their natural state of existence. Commander Thys floated slightly above his chair, his form rippling like liquid shadow. How many of them are there? Over 8 billion, Dr. Nexus responded. Fleet Admiral Gorex's 4 eyes widened in disbelief. Billion? That's more than our entire Crimson Dominion combined. They reproduce rapidly and adapt to new environments with unprecedented efficiency, the scientist continued. Our deep scans show they've learned to thrive in every biome on their planet, from frozen wastelands, where temperatures would freeze our blood solid, to desert regions where the heat would melt our armor. Master Venka's shadowy form seemed to grow darker. What do we know of their technology? Primitive by our standards, but effective in ways we hadn't considered, Dr. Nexus admitted. They've developed weapons capable of sterilizing their entire planet multiple times over. They launch vehicles into space using controlled explosions. Most interesting, they appear to deliberately make their technology more dangerous than necessary. General Vorthak stood and walked to the viewing port, where the 3 dying stars cast everything in blood-red light. This was normal for them. This was safety. But these humans lived in conditions that made their death worlds look like paradise gardens. Explain this last point. They have activities called extreme sports, Dr. Nexus said, bringing up new images. These serve no survival purpose except to court death for entertainment. They deliberately throw themselves from great heights, swim with apex predators, and race vehicles at lethal speeds. They appear to find danger enjoyable. The council members exchanged glances. They were warriors born, survivors who had faced death countless times. But they did it because they had to, because their worlds demanded it. These humans seemed to seek it out voluntarily. Huntress Zalara's mandibles clicked rapidly in what her species called threat assessment mode. Why should we concern ourselves with this species? They're clearly too primitive to pose any threat to the Dominion. General Vorthak turned back to the group, his rocky features set in grim determination. Because they survived a Class X death world. Do any of you truly understand what that means? The chamber fell silent except for the distant vibrations of dying stars. It means they might be tougher than us, Commander Thys whispered, his form flickering with uncertainty. Exactly, Vorthak nodded. For 3,000 years, we've dominated this galaxy because no one could match our resilience. We've built the Crimson Dominion on the foundation that we are the ultimate survivors. But these humans, what if they're stronger? Fleet Admiral Gorex crossed his massive arms. You're suggesting we make contact. I'm suggesting we invite them to join us, Vorthak replied. The hegemony grows stronger every day. Those soft-worlders think their advanced technology makes them superior. They've been pressing against our borders, testing our defenses. What if we had allies who were even tougher than we are? Master Venka's eyes glowed like dying embers. And if they refuse our invitation, then we'll know they're wise as well as strong, Vorthak answered. But I don't think they'll refuse. From what we've observed, these humans seem to enjoy new challenges. Dr. Nexus processed this for several moments before speaking. Who should we send for first contact? Ambassador Krax, Huntress Zalara suggested. He's survived diplomatic missions to 47 hostile species. If anyone can handle humans, it's him. General Vorthak nodded slowly. Make it so. But be careful. Something tells me we're about to change the balance of power in the galaxy forever. None of them realized they were making the biggest mistake in the Crimson Dominion's 3,000-year history. 3 days later, Ambassador Krax's vessel dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the Sol system. The seasoned diplomat had handled first contact with species that breathed acid and civilizations that communicated through controlled warfare. His scaled hide bore scars from encounters with beings that most diplomats wouldn't survive meeting. But as his ship approached the small blue world, something felt different. His instruments detected massive energy signatures across the planet's surface. Cities glowed with power levels that seemed impossibly high for such a primitive species. Thousands of artificial satellites monitored everything with precision that rivaled Dominion surveillance networks. These humans had been busy. "Open a communication channel," Ambassador Krax ordered his crew. A moment later, a voice crackled through the speakers, translated by the ship's computers into Dominion Standard. "Unknown vessel, this is Earth Defense Command. Please state your identity and intentions." Ambassador Krax smiled, revealing rows of serrated teeth that had evolved to tear through armor plating. Defense Command. These humans were ready for visitors. He approved of species that prepared for war. "This is Ambassador Krax of the Crimson Dominion. We come seeking peaceful contact with the human species." There was a pause that lasted exactly 4.7 seconds, long enough to run comprehensive scans on his vessel and cross-reference his transmission against their databases. When the voice returned, it carried undertones that Krax's experienced ear recognized as barely controlled excitement. "Ambassador Krax, you are cleared to approach Earth orbit. Follow navigation beacon 77 Alpha to Station Unity. Welcome to our system." As his ship followed the prescribed route, Krax watched Earth grow larger on his screens. The storms were truly massive, the lightning displays more violent than anything in Dominion space. Yet somehow, this world had produced 8 billion survivors who called such conditions home. Soon he would meet humanity's representatives face to face. Soon, the Crimson Dominion would learn what humans were truly capable of. He had no idea that he was about to witness something that would fundamentally change everything they thought they knew about strength, survival, and the nature of apex predators. When prey becomes predator. 6 months after first contact, the integration of humans into the Crimson Dominion was proceeding with disturbing efficiency. What should have been a careful, gradual process spanning decades had become something that kept the Dominion's leadership awake during their sleep cycles. In the training facilities of Bloodstone Station, Master Sergeant Sarah Chen led her squad through what the Dominion considered advanced survival training. The exercise took place in a chamber that simulated the surface of Hellscape Prime, where the ground was molten glass and the atmosphere was composed of vaporized metals that could dissolve armor in minutes. Watching through reinforced observation windows, General Vorthak tried to process what he was seeing. Dominion soldiers trained in these conditions for 15 minutes at a time, and even then, many suffered permanent damage despite full environmental protection. The humans had been inside for 4 hours. Temperature readings. He asked his aide, Captain Zorith. "Holding steady at 847 degrees standard," Zorith replied, his voice tight with disbelief. "The humans removed their outer gear 3 hours ago and are now operating in basic uniforms." Through the observation port, Vorthak watched Sarah Chen coordinate her team's movements with casual efficiency. They were sweating, certainly, but they showed no signs of distress. Worse, they were actually laughing as they completed objectives that had been designed to push Dominion warriors to their absolute limits. "Increase environmental stress by 20%. Vorthak ordered. The temperature climbed. The humans noticed. Sarah looked around and made some comment that caused her team to chuckle, but they simply rolled up their sleeves and continued the exercise. Another 20%. Now the humans were breathing harder, but they maintained their coordination and effectiveness. Sarah Chen actually smiled as she helped a teammate over a pile of simulated molten debris. "Sir," Captain Zorith said quietly, "if we increase it further, we'll exceed safety limits for all Dominion species." Vorthak stared at the humans operating in conditions that would kill his best warriors, treating the lethal environment like a minor inconvenience. Shut it down. In the research laboratories, Dr. Maya Patel was causing similar concerns among the Dominion's scientific community. The human xenobiologist worked alongside Dr. Nexus, studying samples from Venom Falls, a world where the very rocks secreted acids that could eat through starship hulls. You should use full containment protocols, Dr. Nexus warned as Maya reached for a sample container. Those specimens release vapors that can dissolve living tissue. Maya paused, examined the container, then opened it, and carefully lifted out a crystalline formation with her bare hands. "It's warm," she observed, turning the sample to catch the light. "And it smells like citrus." Dr. Nexus's mechanical systems registered shock protocols. You can detect the scent. Those vapors should have destroyed your olfactory sensors. Humans have a high tolerance for acidic compounds, Maya explained casually, setting the sample down. "We actually consume acids for pleasure in our food. This reminds me of vitamin C supplements." You consume acids for pleasure. Master Venka's shadowy form seemed to collapse in on itself. "We invited them to join us because we thought they were survivors like us." "No," General Vorthak said quietly, his rocky features set in grim realization. "We're survivors. There's something else entirely." Commander Thiss's voice carried undertones of absolute certainty. "They're not survivors who learn to fight. They're predators who learn to think." The truth hit the assembled leadership like a physical blow. The Crimson Dominion had built their reputation on being the toughest species in the galaxy. They had survived worlds that killed everything else. They had carved out their territory through sheer resilience and determination. They were the ultimate survivors. But humans hadn't just survived their Deathworld. They had dominated it so completely that they were actively seeking out new challenges. Earth wasn't their limit. It was their starting point. "There's more," Dr. Nexus continued, his mechanical voice carrying undertones of something approaching panic. "Our cultural analysis indicates that humans don't consider themselves particularly tough or resilient. They refer to most Dominion worlds as harsh but manageable. They've been treating our most dangerous environments as minor inconveniences because, by their standards, they are." Fleet Admiral Gorex's 4 eyes focused on a single, terrifying thought. If they don't consider themselves remarkable, what would they consider dangerous? The question hung in the air like a death sentence. These beings who had casually dismissed the Dominion's most lethal environments as somewhat uncomfortable clearly operated by standards that exceeded their comprehension. "We need to know their true capabilities," General Vorthak said finally. "Full analysis. I want to know exactly what we've invited into our Dominion." As the council dispersed, none of them noticed the small recording device that had been discreetly placed in the chamber during the humans' integration process. None of them realized that everything they had discussed was being transmitted in real time to a small blue planet that had produced the ultimate predators. On Earth, Sarah Chen set down her communication device and smiled. The expression would have terrified the Dominion leadership if they could have seen it. It wasn't the smile of a survivor or even a warrior. It was the smile of an apex predator that had just realized its prey had walked willingly into the trap. "Phase 1 complete," she reported to her superiors. "They're beginning to understand what they're dealing with. Recommend proceeding to Phase 2. The response came back immediately. "Approved. Show them what Earth really produced." The greatest mistake in Crimson Dominion history was about to become their final lesson in the nature of true predators /.